Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah. A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to HJN and the Legacy of Supers. So today, I know I said I was going to stick around to Marvel and DC for a little while, but this time, let me just simply go ahead and get to some unfinished business here, because during the Heroes section in the Legacy of Heroes here on HJN, I made an entire episode that talked about the Incredibles. Yeah. So you know what? I feel like now is the time for me to simply talk about their main nemesis in the movie The Incredibles, released in 2004, called Syndrome. Of course, the real name of this guy is Buddy Pines, who eventually wanted to be known as Incrediboy. But because of Mr. Incredible's, well, negligence for assistance from a sidekick or whatever, that's eventually what led Buddy Pines become the Syndrome, the new supervillain that the entire family of the Incredibles would have to face against. Of course, this is not one of the only times that has happened. There have been plenty of other occasions where some people have actually been rejected or neglected by the heroes out there, so of course that's how they become the villains eventually. Venom's story pretty much had that kind of problem, and there was also a couple others along the way as well, but let's not elaborate on those. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about Syndrome, because after all, there's quite a few things I have left to say here, because the film The Incredibles from 2004 was pretty amazing for what it was. It was another big innovation that Pixar decided to utilize based on the classic superhero trend, which still continues to run to this day. A lot of people try to take up some adaptations to it, and there have been many that tried, plenty of which have failed. There have been only so many good superhero films out there that seem to take hold into it. Of course, there have been only some that were not from Marvel or DC, which were pretty much professionals in the superhero business. Pixar, of course, did pretty well with The Incredibles in 2004. And of course, with a sequel that came out 14 years later. Yeah, it took them that long to get there, but cut them some slack. They're hardworking people. Even the featurette that pretty much appears before the film even starts showcases the cast members, including Craig Nelson, Holly Hunter, and Samuel L. Jackson, talking about the reason why Pixar took that long just to get to a sequel for The Incredibles. But anyways, going back to Syndrome from the first film, I will say for sure that Syndrome has gotten a lot of powers, including a glove that actually has the ability to control a giant robot, but also operates some sort of, I guess, power beam of sort that pretty much immobilizes anything it touches. I mean, that was a pretty good thing out there. That's something I haven't really noticed before in the superhero business. Or supervillain business, if you will. The super business, I might as well call it. But of course, other than all that, Syndrome's got some pretty nice ways to go through, including some rocket boots, as well as a pretty extensive ingenuity, and a quite so cocky attitude that kind of reminds me of Sonic the Hedgehog. But of course, other than all that, the film simply shows Syndrome becoming the prime enemy that the Incredibles had to face. And by the end of the film, Syndrome ends up getting defeated after, well, if Edna Mode hadn't said anything about capes and how dangerous they are, then, well, that's pretty much what happens. The cape Syndrome wears becomes that dangerous. It actually ends up getting Syndrome killed after, well, getting sucked into a plane's engine. Yeah, that was bad. Really bad. But you know what, though? That was kind of the ending we needed. We pretty much needed to establish some sort of closure based on what Edna was talking about. So, of course, that's kind of what it was. It was proof, right there, that any super being who has a cape could easily become in danger to the environment around them. And Syndrome getting sucked into a plane engine thanks to the cape and how long it is, I mean, that's pretty much the end of that. But going forward, we could probably look back on Syndrome for being a pretty notorious enemy for the Incredibles, but also probably one of the most recognizable in modern day culture. or maybe even in Pixar history, but nonetheless, I'd say it was a pretty good run for what it was. And Syndrome, of course, had a pretty nice role going on throughout the whole film. Well, anyways, now I guess is the time where I can say that I might be going back to Marvel and DC for the rest of the time here. But if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.